So, who was the people that lived in Renaissance Italy? Renaissance Italy wasn't united. It was chaotic, ruthless, and brilliant. Everyone talks about Renaissance Italy like it was one magical place. Michelangelo, art, beauty, rebirth. But here's the truth most people miss. Italy wasn't a country. It wasn't united, and most people living there weren't artists at all. Renaissance Italy was a patchwork of rival cities, vicious class divisions, political backstabbing, and non-stop power struggles. And that chaos is exactly why it produced some of the greatest art, business systems, and political thinking the world has ever seen. So today, I'm not talking about paintings. I'm talking about the people who lived there, who held power, who got crushed, and why Renaissance Italy worked the way it did. Why Italy was never one place, the city-states and their power games. Italy looks like it should have been united, surrounded by sea, protected by the Alps, but geography actually tore it apart. The peninsula is long, fractured, and split by the Apennine Mountains like a crooked spine. Invaders came from the north, traders came by sea, cultures piled on top of each other instead of blending. So instead of becoming one people, Italians became hyper-local. You weren't Italian, you were Florentine, Venetian, Milanese, Genoese. Alliances shifted constantly. Friends today, enemies tomorrow. Even when someone like Gian Galeazzo Visconti nearly controlled half of Italy, he didn't see it as a country, just personal property. When he died, he literally split it among his kids and attempts at unity. They failed fast. Machiavelli later summed up the Italian attitude perfectly when someone suggested unity. Don't make me laugh. That wasn't sarcasm, that was realism. Who actually lived there? The classes. This is the part people romanticize and get wrong. 1. The nobility. Old feudal families, loved war, loved status. Looked down on merchants, even in cities. They never fully adapted. They wanted power without dirtying their hands with trade. 2. The popolo grasso, the fat people. Wealthy merchants, bankers, industrialists. They ran the cities. They weren't noble by birth, but money gave them leverage. This group built Renaissance capitalism. They funded art, politics, wars, everything. 3. The popolo minuto, the little people. Shopkeepers, artisans, clerks, small traders. They worked constantly, paid taxes, and had limited power. Sometimes they got representation, often they didn't. 4. The working poor, the largest group, and the most invisible. Unskilled laborers, textile workers, porters, no diaries, no letters, no monuments. They lived near starvation, couldn't form unions, couldn't strike, couldn't rise. If they protested, they were crushed, their only real escape, becoming mercenaries and risking death. This wasn't a golden age for everyone, it was brutal. Venice, the weird exception. Venice didn't play by Italian rules, no feudal aristocracy, no constant revolts, no chaos. It was a merchant republic, and it leaned into it hard. The state controlled everything: trade routes, shipbuilding, licenses, even bankruptcy prevention. The arsenal of Venice was basically an early factory system, thousands of workers, standardized production, state management, and socially. Venice was shockingly tolerant. Jews could trade, Muslims could trade, foreigners were welcome. Why? Because Venice cared about money first, and it worked. The population felt united because their interests aligned with the state. That unity is why Venice survived while others collapsed. Ironically, its success taught later democracies almost nothing, because people learn more from failure than stability. Florence, and why it broke. Florence was smarter and messier. It had banking, manufacturing, trade, art, class warfare. Bankers loaned money to kings. Manufacturers relied on volatile wool markets. Plagues wiped out half the workforce. Add class resentment, noble arrogance, and merchant greed, and you get instability. This is where Machiavelli comes in. He didn't celebrate power, he analyzed why it failed. Florence didn't collapse because it lacked ideals. It collapsed because it had too many competing interests and no unity, and that lesson still matters. Conclusion: what the Renaissance really was. Renaissance Italy wasn't peaceful. It wasn't fair, it wasn't united, but it was competitive. Small states meant constant political experimentation, rapid economic innovation, fierce artistic rivalry. The average Italian was more politically aware than almost anyone else in Europe. They argued, they schemed, they adapted, and out of that pressure came modern banking, capitalism, political theory, and some of the greatest art ever made. Not because life was easy, but because it wasn't. If you enjoyed this, I am making an entire series about the Renaissance, so like and subscribe to make sure you catch them all. And remember, great ideas don't come from comfort, they come from friction.